California has a crime problem, but not the version you think you understand. It's not just headlines, it's not just viral clips, and it's definitely not limited to a few bad areas that people can easily avoid. What's happening right now is quieter, slower, and in many ways more dangerous than anything that gets talked about publicly. There are cities across the state where crime isn't just rising, it's becoming part of daily life. Places where violent crime is 2, 3, sometimes even 5 times higher than the national average. Where people don't even bother reporting theft anymore because they already know nothing will happen. Where police response times stretch from minutes into hours. And maybe the part that should worry people the most, the people who can afford to leave are leaving, while everyone else is left to adapt. This isn't panic. This is pattern. Before we go deeper, a quick disclaimer. This is not about politics, fear, or exaggeration. Everything you're about to hear is grounded in real data, real trends, and real conditions happening right now across California. No spin, no opinion disguised as fact. Just the reality that shows up when you look at the numbers closely. And once you start connecting those numbers, a very clear picture begins to form. These are not isolated cases. They are signals. And the pattern is repeating itself across very different types of cities. Some will surprise you. Some will confirm what you already suspected. But all of them point to the same underlying shift. Let's start with San Pablo, because it perfectly captures how misleading appearances can be. This is a small city in the East Bay, just over 30,000 residents, sitting between Richmond and El Cerrito. Most people drive through it without even realizing they've entered a separate city. It doesn't have a major downtown. It doesn't have a defining landmark. And it doesn't have the kind of presence that makes people pay attention. But the data here tells a completely different story. Violent crime in San Pablo runs roughly 3 times higher than the California average. That's not a small deviation. That's a major signal. And here's what makes it more concerning. In a city this small, crime isn't spread out. It's concentrated. Everything is close together. That means when something happens, it feels closer, more immediate, harder to ignore. Assaults and robberies are not isolated incidents. They're recurring patterns. And when patterns form in a place this compact, they become part of the environment very quickly. But the real issue isn't just inside San Pablo itself. It's what surrounds it. The city borders Richmond, which has a long history of elevated crime. And crime doesn't stop at boundaries. It moves through connected areas, especially where opportunity exists. The police department in San Pablo is small, operating with limited resources in an area that demands much more. That imbalance creates gaps. And those gaps show up clearly in property crime numbers. Vehicle theft, burglaries, break-ins, these are not occasional events. They are frequent enough that businesses have adjusted their entire way of operating. Walk down San Pablo Avenue and you'll see it immediately. Cameras on every corner. Bars on windows. Reinforced doors. These are not upgrades. They are defensive measures. And when an entire business district starts operating defensively, that tells you something deeper is happening. Now let's move to Pomona, where the situation becomes more layered. Pomona is a much larger city, about 150,000 people, and on the surface, it looks like a place that should be thriving. It has a university, a major fairground, a historic downtown, and a location that connects it to some of the most important parts of Southern California. But beneath that, there's a long-standing issue that has never fully gone away. Crime in Pomona is not new. It's persistent. The violent crime rate here sits above both county and state averages. And while things have improved compared to the peak gang violence of previous decades, the underlying structure never disappeared. It adapted. It became less visible, but not less real. Gang networks still exist. Territory still matters. And the cycles that drive violence continue in ways that don't always make headlines. That's what makes it harder to address. When something becomes less visible, it creates the illusion that it's gone. But the data tells a different story. Property crime is widespread. Vehicle theft has been trending upward. Burglary and package theft are part of everyday life in many neighborhoods. Residents have adapted, not because they want to, but because they have to. Doorbell cameras, neighborhood apps, group chats, systems that function as informal layers of protection. And while these tools help, they don't solve the underlying issue. Here's another piece most people overlook. Police departments are not static. They are constantly dealing with staffing challenges. In Pomona, officers often leave for higher-paying departments nearby. That creates a revolving door. New officers come in, experienced ones leave, and continuity becomes difficult. And when continuity breaks, long-term progress becomes harder to maintain. Now let's shift to a place that doesn't fit the typical image of a high-crime city. Watsonville, a small agricultural town on California's Central Coast. Field of strawberries, open farmland, quiet roads. It looks calm. It feels calm. But that perception hides something important. Watsonville has a crime problem that is almost invisible to the rest of the state. And that invisibility is part of what makes it more difficult to solve. Because the issue here isn't just crime. It's the economic structure behind it. Agriculture drives the local economy, but the jobs are low-wage, seasonal, and physically demanding. That creates a level of poverty that doesn't always show up in obvious ways. And when that kind of economic pressure exists alongside established gang networks, the outcome becomes predictable. Violent crime rates here are higher than they should be for a city this size. Assaults, weapons offenses, and even homicides occur at levels that don't match the image most people have of the area. But here's the contrast that makes it even more striking. Just minutes away, tourists are enjoying beaches, hiking trails, and scenic views, completely unaware of what's happening nearby. When a problem remains unseen, it rarely receives the attention it needs. Now move to Fairfield, and the pattern begins to shift again. Fairfield was once considered a stable alternative, a place where families could move for affordability while still staying connected to the Bay Area. But that stability is starting to change. Crime here hasn't just increased, it has evolved. Violent crime is rising, but property crime is the bigger story. Vehicle theft has surged dramatically. Organized retail theft has become more common. And the reason is something most people don't think about: geography. Fairfield sits at the intersection of major highways. That makes it convenient for commuters and equally convenient for organized crime. A stolen vehicle can leave the city and reach another major area in under an hour. That level of connectivity changes how crime operates. It becomes faster, more mobile, and harder to contain. And when infrastructure supports movement that efficiently, it doesn't just benefit residents, it benefits criminals too. Now consider Inglewood, where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, the city is booming. Massive investment, new stadiums, entertainment districts, luxury housing developments. Billions of dollars flowing into the area. On paper, it looks like a success story. But just a few blocks away, the reality is very different. Crime has not disappeared. Violent crime remains above average. Property crime is still widespread. And the contrast between the new development and existing neighborhoods creates a sense of imbalance. Two different versions of the same city existing side by side. This is where perception and reality begin to separate. Investment can change how a city looks. It doesn't automatically change how it functions at the street level. Now pause for a moment, because this next example changes how you understand everything. Emeryville, a city of about 12,000 people. You can walk across it in minutes. And yet, it produces some of the highest property crime rates per capita in the state. Why? Because population isn't the full story. Traffic is. Emeryville is a commercial hub. Shopping centers, restaurants, entertainment venues. Millions of visitors pass through every year. And where there is high volume, there is opportunity. Vehicle break-ins are constant. Organized retail theft is routine. And the police department is built for a small population, not massive visitor flow. That mismatch creates a situation where crime becomes structurally embedded in how the city operates. Now move to East Palo Alto, and the story becomes something bigger than crime. This city sits next to one of the wealthiest areas in the world. Tech headquarters, venture capital, elite institutions. And right across the boundary, a completely different reality exists. This city once held the highest per capita murder rate in the United States. It has improved significantly, but the underlying challenges remain. Crime hasn't disappeared. It has evolved. And this is where the deeper issue becomes clear. Crime is often a symptom of something larger. In this case, inequality. When extreme wealth exists directly next to long-term poverty, pressure builds. And that pressure shows up in predictable ways. Now, finally, we come to Oakland, a major city with history, culture, and influence. And right now, one of the most closely watched crime situations in the country. Violent crime is high. Robberies are frequent. Car break-ins became a national story. Businesses are closing. Residents are leaving. Police resources are stretched. But what makes Oakland different isn't just the crime itself. It's the shift in behavior. When people change how they live, how they move, where they go, that's when a city changes at a deeper level. And once that shift happens, it becomes extremely difficult to reverse. When you step back and look at all of these cities together, a clear pattern begins to emerge. Different environments, different causes, same outcome, pressure. And the biggest mistake people make is assuming this is temporary. It's not. It's a shift. And the people who recognize that early are the ones who stay ahead of it. Because in the end, this isn't just about crime. It's about where people choose to live and where they choose to leave. And once those decisions start happening at scale, everything changes. Now let's shift to a city that doesn't usually get national attention, but probably should. Visalia. On the surface, Visalia looks like a classic Central Valley success story. A growing population, a walkable downtown, relatively affordable housing compared to the rest of California. It feels stable. It feels livable. But underneath that, there's a pressure building that doesn't get talked about enough. The violent crime rate here sits above the state average, and more importantly, it's been trending in the wrong direction. Assaults make up a large share of incidents, and while gang activity isn't as visible as in larger cities, it still plays a role in how violence spreads across certain areas. But the real issue in Visalia isn't just violent crime. It's the combination of economic strain and rising property crime. Theft, burglary, and vehicle-related crimes are significantly higher than what most people would expect for a city of this size. Businesses in key commercial areas have had to increase security in ways that would normally be associated with much larger urban centers. And here's where the deeper issue starts to show. Visalia sits at the center of an agriculture economy that generates massive value, but much of the workforce behind it earns relatively low wages. That gap creates long-term pressure. And when economic pressure builds over time, it tends to show up in very predictable ways. The police department has been transparent and active, but even with strong local efforts, the root causes go beyond what any single department can solve. And that's what makes Visalia quietly concerning. It looks stable, but the underlying trends tell a different story. Now, finally, we need to talk about a city that feels physically and socially boxed in. El Cajon. Located just east of San Diego, El Cajon sits in a valley surrounded by mountains. And that geography isn't just visual, it shapes the reality of the city itself. Because once you're inside, it can feel like there's nowhere to go. And that feeling shows up in the data. El Cajon consistently records one of the highest crime rates in San Diego County. Both violent crime and property crime exceed county averages by noticeable margins. Assaults, robberies, and weapons-related incidents are persistent, while vehicle theft continues to climb at a rate that puts it among the worst in the region. But what makes El Cajon more complex is everything happening beneath the surface. The city has become a major resettlement area for refugees from conflict zones around the world. That has brought diversity, culture, and new energy into the community. But it has also introduced challenges that require resources the city doesn't always have. Language barriers, economic stress, and limited access to services can make certain populations more vulnerable. And in some cases, that vulnerability is exploited. Add to that a visible homelessness issue concentrated around key service areas, and you start to see how multiple pressures stack on top of each other. Businesses in downtown areas deal with constant shoplifting and property damage. Residents deal with a system that feels stretched, and law enforcement is left trying to manage a situation that goes far beyond traditional policing. El Cajon isn't struggling because it isn't trying. It's struggling because the scale of the challenges is bigger than what a single city can realistically handle alone.